Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise, we don't make money. So check it out and throw some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks. Welcome to It Gets Weird, our comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try and make your world a little weirder. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Niall. And today, Kyle, I'm taking your slot here. You've been in the beer brigade recently, and today I'm drinking a Natty Boh. I got a chill after work vibe.
Yeah. What's a Natty Boh?
I'm man, not to dox myself, but it's the kind of local kind of basic beer. Like it's a local macro lager in this area. So it's like you're in line with like your PBRs and stuff like that.
Oh, I got
But it's local. So
okay, nice. Well, I'm glad because I don't know whether I could get through this one drinking a beer. I decided to just, pour myself a nice tasty cup of fresh sink water.
That's
taking a quick sip.
There's nothing better, okay?
I agree. But this one was too weird and complicated, in a sense, for me to drink a beer while we discuss it. I decided I needed to do this one completely sober.
Is it bad that I'm not?
No, you're gonna love it.
Okay. Fantastic.
I just want you to look for avenues to, make fun of like a bunch of like weird historical racists and explorers because they're going to come up in this episode. It's going to be a fun.
Oh, cool.
It's going to be a fun thing. No, Niall, this week I got back into the world of cryptozoology.
Oh, it's been a minute for you. You've been doing these like long form fucking historical epics that are dealing in the world of like parapsychology and ufology. So how does it feel to be back in the world of cryptids?
Well, I it's a good place to be, I think, and this one is really up my alley. Because it's got a lot of history attached to it.
The arc of this podcast has been really funny to watch because you just keep getting more and more into history and like finding ways to like make them more talk about like, which is good. Like I'm into the history of all this shit. But it's funny which ways you've gone over the years.
I don't know. Just I'm very intrigued. Like if I can have history that's like attached to something Fortean, something cryptozoological, I really love to dig into it because I don't know. It's like cool. It's like it was kind of amazing just like researching the original story because part of this has to deal with an account of these like missionaries exploring the Mississippi River Valley. Okay. And these accounts they're contained in like multiple volumes and they basically cover the entire 17th and 18th centuries. And they're like I got lost in the sauce reading about these French guys who would like occasionally like, liberally use the term savage while talking about like, oh, we learned about these Native American people's like dances and songs. And there would be like details about it and they would record their like understanding of what they're... It's just, I don't know. It's like crazy to me to read something from like multiple hundreds of years ago that was like translated and preserved. And it's like, I don't know. It's fun. It's fun for me.
Yeah. I always love looking at like old source texts for stuff like this kind of like, especially like reading old newspaper accounts of UFOs and cryptids is always really, cause like, there's such this weird tone where they're like still trying to be informative, but they also like a lot of times don't believe it at all and like kind of dunk on it in the middle of the articles. It's very fun to it's fun to consume.
Yeah, and this one is like this one almost has an air of mystery to it because it took basically this creature. All right, let me back up a little bit. This is an interesting creature, and it's maybe it's really maybe tenuously defined as a cryptid once you put in enough research into it. But it's on the cryptid wiki, which is like if it's on there, I think it's fair game.
That's fair. I think I can agree with that.
But it's like, this is like, even though it's sort of tenuous to call it a cryptid, it's still such an interesting, weird story and an interesting, weird creature that I want to talk about it. So this week, and it Venn diagrams into so many things that we've already kind of discussed as well. So this week, Niall, we're going to talk about a dragon-like cryptid known as the Piasa Bird.
Now, is Piasa the name? Piasa, is that like a name of a place or?
Well, now hold on. Okay. Because it is honestly so funny that you say that because you basically spoiled the last 15 minutes of the episode.
Oh, really?
Without knowing it. Like,
look, so many of these things are like the Beast of Bray Road. Yeah. And you're like, okay, so somebody saw a beast on Bray Road. And I'm just wondering, did somebody see a bird hovering over Piasa, if that's someplace?
Yeah, well, not exactly, but let's put it this way. It may have once been the name of a place.
Okay. We'll put a pin on that one. Yeah, put it in the wall for later.
This is like gonna be untangling a bunch of different cords. You know when you like take the cords for your fucking laptop, your phone charger, whatever you need, you just fucking shove them into your backpack. Mm-hmm. That's what happened to the story of the Piasa Bird. I gotta pronounce that correctly also. So I haven't said it out loud yet. So I gotta remember Piasa.
That is the one downside of just like doing your notes on a laptop and not like talking to anybody is you a lot of times we're saying things for the first time when we're hitting record, which is, maybe poor planning, but it just happens sometimes.
Yeah.
But like I was okay. What was I was about to say something else, and then I of course had to fucking roast us. I don't know. Anyway,
look, Niall, you may have already guessed where this is going. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The Piasa Bird story hails from Native American mythology, which is always a fucking.
Hey, America, where your religion can be our monsters.
It's like, okay, like it's always funny to me because the only way we get these Native American myths and turn them into cryptids is by like really fucking them up. And frankly, I don't think I've seen one that has been fucked up this much before. They just totally butchered it.
This is beyond like Thunderbirds and like
this is within the canon of Thunderbirds, and by the way.
Oh, really? Okay,
we'll get to that. But yeah, this is like the whole thing of Skinwalker is like people don't talk about it, which is why we don't have that information. Thunderbirds is like a cosmological mythology in like really old Native American stuff. So, but this is one that is like it's just fucked from multiple different angles, and it's really strange. So, this is from a mythology, but it specifically comes from tribes within the Illinois Confederation. Okay. A lot of places online. This is just me kind of like guessing, because a lot of places will say that it comes from the Illini tribe. That reads as slightly inaccurate to me, just because when I looked into the Illini, that's actually just another name for the Illinois Confederation, which, as I understand it, is like a dozen different tribes that sort of lived in the Mississippi River Valley, like throughout Missouri and Iowa and stuff. So Illini tribe seems a little off to me, but that's usually they're just referring to these people that lived in this general area in Illinois.
Okay.
So yeah, it was I don't know. Once again, I'm veering into history podcast territory. It's awesome. But before we get too deep into the historical stuff here, I actually want to talk about the cryptozoological side of the story, because that's mostly what you will find on this creature on like a cursory Google. And not all of what you'll read on the cryptid side of the web is accurate. In fact, a lot of it isn't, believe it or not. So yeah, what would a cursory Google tell the cryptid enthusiast? Well, what you'll find is places saying that the Piasa bird is also referred to as the bird of the evil spirit, or the bird that devours men.
Okay, so those are three pretty different names. Like, one you can take as like some sort of translation, but how do you get the evil spirit and also devours men?
Well, so it's a good question. Many websites will tell you that it's actually a loose translation of the word Piasa, which already sounds like bullshit to me. When you read that Piasa means both of those, could mean both of those things.
Yeah.
But usually they'll do what websites like that typically do, and they'll just tell you that that's what it's also referred to or translated as. I don't know where that... Well, okay, actually, I do know where that comes from, but we'll get to that. So... Generally speaking, the Piasa bird itself is described as having a body the shape and size of a horse.
What? Okay.
Yeah, so picture a horse's body, but like when you start getting to like legs,
take
and
those
head,
legs off.
Take the legs off. Take the neck up off. Basically, take the tail off, and just picture a lean horse torso. Basically.
Yeah. Okay. A horso. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah. So picture a horso, but it also has like this long, almost serpentine neck. It has like almost a human bestial face. It's like a humanish beast-like face with these like it almost, in some depictions, it's like sort of almost like ogre-like is the way I was thinking of it, or like orc-like, because it has these long white fangs, these two like long white fangs on its lower jaws. And then it has two big white deer-like horns on top of its head. And then pretty much all the depictions you'll find of this thing give it a huge pair of wings. Some depictions show it as having these big bat-like wings. Others show it as basically having like what are effectively giant eagle's wings.
Okay.
And it was said that when they flapped these wings in the air, they could bend trees, and that as they breathed, fire would flicker from their nostrils. It's also said to have had a long spiked tail that could wrap around its own body 3 times, and sharp eagle-like clawed feet with throat-slashingly sharp talons. Now, to clarify, the spiked tail wrapping around its own body, in a lot of depictions of this thing, you'll see the tail come from its butt and like wrap up over its head, and then wrap back around in front of its head, and then under itself, and then back around. So like it's not like coiling around itself like a snake. It's like creating a wheel around itself.
Yeah, okay.
A boo-boo
so
wheel,
it's getting ready to do
will.
a spin attack.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how it looks in most depictions.
This thing is given kind of chimera vibes. Like,
yeah. But it gets defined as like a dragon, and then in other places a bird. And we're gonna find out that it's fucking weird that it has any association with birds or dragons at all. You're gonna like, the more you uncover about this thing, the less those attachments make you can make sense of them, but it's just like, why that's not at all what this thing was.
Interesting. Okay.
So
I like I love sometimes these when you dig into the history of these creatures, the games of telephone that happened like between any initial maybe sightings or folklore and then what gets put and passed around online. And sometimes that's very hard to unravel. So I'll be curious to see where this goes.
This was a game of telephone that was played from the mid 17th century all the way to 2005. By the way,
Damn.
it's so ridiculous. So legend has it that this thing was simultaneously stealthy enough to snatch unsuspecting folks from nearby the river where it lived, but it was also so ferocious that its scream could shake the earth. The thing was said to have killed many, many people before it was permanently taken down in a fight. So if you go to the cryptid wiki or a number of other places, this is the legend, the story, that is copied down online about the Piasa bird.
Okay.
The village was a secure and happy place. Chief of the Illini was Watoga. He was old and had led his tribe in the ways of peace for most of his lifetime. Watoga and his people loved their home and their way of life. Then, one morning, as the sun began to climb towards the summit of its cloudless sky, terror touched the Illini. The village stirred. A number of younger braves were leaving on an early morning fishing expedition. Some were already on the river in their canoes, others preparing to embark, when suddenly the very earth seemed to shudder with the sound of an alien scream. Also, this is just a blanket thing, but the way these fucking French explorers and Americans refer to the Native Americans is not cool. So I'm just saying that right up front.
You're doing some live editing.
There's a couple of there's a couple spots where it sucks. So it goes on. The Piasa bird attacked and took one of the braves, and after that it got worse. It came back, picking off one by one. The village felt helpless. They turned to their chief to find a solution to this disaster. The creature seemed invulnerable, and even the greatest of the village could not beat it. Watoga appealed to the Great Spirit. For nearly a full moon, he prayed and fasted. Then, in a dream, he found the answer. The body of the Piasa bird was not protected under the wings. After offering thanks to the Great Spirit, Watoga called the tribe together and devised a plan that would destroy the Piasa bird. They fastened and sharpened their arrows, waiting for the beast to come to the village to snatch up another person. Suddenly, the scream of the Piasa bird broke the silence, and the winged monster swept into view. Immediately, it sighted Watoga, and with what seemed a shriek of delight, it pounced. As it did, Watoga fell to the ground and grasped the strong roots that grew there. The pain of the talons sinking into his flesh inspired him to grip the roots even more tightly. As the Piasa bird raised its great wings in an effort to carry off its victim, the 6 braves stepped from their hiding place and shot 6 poisoned arrows into the unprotected place beneath the beast's wings. Again and again the bird raised its wings to fly, but Watoga held fast, and each time 6 poisoned arrows drove into the bird's vulnerable spot. Finally, the poison did its job. With a scream of agony, the Piasa bird released its hold on Watoga and plunged down the bluff to disappear forever in the swift waters of the great river. Carefully, tenderly, the braves carried Watoga to his teepee, where, in time, he was nursed back to health. Then a great celebration was held in the camp of the Illini. The next day, Terahianawaka mixed paints and carrying them to the bluff, painted a picture of the Piasa bird in tribute to the victory of Watoga and the Illini. Every time an Indian passed the painting, he shot an arrow in salute to the bravery of Watoga and the deliverance from the Piasa bird. So that's the legend.
Good epic.
Now,
taking down a big old bird.
This legend in a similar form can be traced back to the August 1836 issue of The Family Magazine in an article titled The Piasa, an Indian Tradition of Illinois, written by John Russell.
As in, it can be traced back to being from there, as in it started there, or that was the first?
This is where the story seems to spread. It's not the first place that it's so... God. You're just going to have to... How do I say
this? Stick with you?
Just stick with me, because basically you can trace back this version of the legend to this, but it's also kind of the only legend like this. So just stick with me, because we're gonna unpack what the fuck this is, because not to get too far ahead of myself, this story is all kinds of fucked up.
Okay.
So one of his main, John Russell, the guy who wrote this, one of his main inspirations for writing about this legend, and another thing that you will find in articles and stuff about the Piasa bird, it's from this account from these two French explorers, Jacques Marquette and Louis Joliet. And Marquette and Joliet were actually the first white men to explore the region around the Mississippi River. Now, they were also Jesuit missionaries, of course. So for the entire trip, Marquette kept a journal detailing their experiences, and that journal's text actually survived to present day. You can find,
cool.
This is what I was talking about. You can find like multiple volumes of like years of exploring this area translated, and you can read like what they recorded about their experience there. And so I don't know what it's something about just like, I get really into these stories of like these like dipshit explorers coming to the Americas and like just wandering around and finding things out, because there's also a lot of stories. For every successful story like this one, of the people who like were able to like record all this stuff and, you know, survive the trip, there's like a dozen where a bunch of explorers like pissed off Native Americans and got murdered and like just like were just completely stupid and fucked up their entire exploration, and those stories are fascinating. Yeah. So, but this one's we got to
get the great failures of yes. expeditions. The book, you know.
Honestly, if somebody were to compile a book, maybe this exists. If somebody were to compile a book of like pre-United States America's exploration with like the Spanish, the French, all these people who came here and just would fucking die in horrible ways trying to like find the new country or whatever, I would love to read that book. Genuinely, that would be so sick.
Imagine if you do that book, but instead you put it in the format of an Uncle John's bathroom reader. So you can just like when you're sitting down to take a shit, you can just like read a story of an early explorer eating shit in wild.
Yeah, I would love that. I would genuinely love that.
It'd be great. Little like bring in some like cartoonist illustrations to get it going. You know?
I'll help illustrate that one. Somebody let me know. So yeah, in this journal, Marquette and Joliet, there's a section from 1673, and in there is a description of these quote two painted monsters on some rocks along the Mississippi, like on these sort of bluffs, these rock faces along the river. And this would be in a location just north of modern-day Alton, Illinois. And also, like I said, they say some uncool shit about Native Americans since they're 17th century explorers, and that is their wont. So,
but I'm still guessing that Joliet, Illinois is named after this guy. So
honestly, probably,
allegations didn't stick.
Yeah, I guess not. I guess not. But here's what Marquette says in his journal. Quote, while skirting some rocks, which by their height and length inspired awe, we saw upon one of them two painted monsters, which at first made us afraid, and upon which the boldest savages dare not long rest their eyes. They are as large as a calf. They have horns on their heads like those of deer, a horrible look, red eyes, a beard like a tiger's, a face somewhat like a man's, a body covered with scales, and so long a tail that it winds all around the body, passing above the head and going back between the legs, ending in a fish's tail. Green, red, and black are the three colors composing the picture. Moreover, these two monsters are so... Moreover, these two monsters are so well painted that we cannot believe that any savage is their author, for good painters in France would find it difficult to paint so well, and, besides, they are so high up on the rock that it is difficult to reach that place conveniently to paint them. So, even back then, we were doing this thing of like, well, obviously, people who aren't white couldn't have possibly done this, so it must have been ancient aliens or whatever.
Yeah, it must have been some white people must have been here at some point to do this painting because we couldn't definitely have this. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
fucking
a
skill
classic.
issue.
It's a classic thing that apparently people do. So yeah, these two racist dorks also sketched the image that they saw, but that sketch ended up lost. So
okay.
One thing that I would like to point out right now before we move along is that there's something notably absent. Well, there's a couple things, but there's something that is like very conspicuously absent in the account made by Marquette, which is wings.
Right.
He does not describe the creature in this painting as having wings, which just go ahead and stop. You're by the time we're like, basically the last like 15, 20 minutes of this episode is going to be like a big like twist.
Yeah.
So
you're going to
stuff your pockets.
Shyamalan me. We're going to go to catering and there'll be pizza boxes and they're full of salad.
Yeah, exactly. So just like stuff your pockets with all these little tidbits, and then we'll pull them all out later and throw them out on the
If
table.
this ends up being like a fucking snake that swallowed like a large mammal, so there's like a big comical chunk in the middle,
would be
there you go.
That would be very funny, but just you wait. So
okay.
So yeah, we have an account of another explorer who saw the sketch. So we basically have this guy who saw Marquette's drawing of the thing and then put it in a report. So this is René Robert Cavalier, Sieur de la Salle, who described it like this in 1680. Quote, "The monstrous sketch of which the Sieur Joliet brought back is a grotesque figure painted by some Indian of the river. No one will avow its origin. It is a day and a half's journey from Crevecoeur, and if the Sieur Joliet had descended a little farther, he would have seen another more frightful still." So what this report means is that there was apparently a second painting of the same creature down the Mississippi.
Oh, okay.
Now, scholars suggest that the second painting of the Piasa Bird, as it is now being called, was likely somewhere around Cape St. Anthony down this river. In 1682, La Salle would make the journey on the river himself, and in his own account would seem to confirm the existence of the second painting just south of the first one spotted by Marquette and Joliet. Here's the thing, though.
Okay.
Here's the thing. Accounts of this painting of a fearsome creature akin to the one from the Joliet expedition get a little fuzzy. Like this second painting, it gets a little questionable. So multiple accounts exist in the 17th century, but just from reading the discrepancies and whatnot, it almost seems to me like there's already explorer banana phone type shit going on here. I can't say that with absolute certainty, but if you want to dig deeper into that, a lot of my information about these other accounts comes from a scholarly article written by Wayne C. Temple in the Journal of the Illinois State Historical Society. And in this article, published in autumn of 1956, it's titled "The Piasa Bird, Fact or Fiction," and it attempts to make sense of the different reports, taking into account things like the time gap between accounts and the dubiousness of the existence of this second painting of the Piasa. And it even takes into account that there were other explorers that were giving reports that were just like rival missionaries to Marquette's Jesuit mission.
Mm-hmm.
So it's there's a lot of weird little things in here that you have to kind of keep in mind when reading about these other accounts.
There can be extenuating circumstances on some of this information.
Yes. And Temple notes that there is some evidence to suggest that if there was a second painting of this creature near Alton, it was likely destroyed by weathering within like 20 years of the initial expedition between Marquette and Joliet. So by 1721, another French explorer, Francois Xavier de Charlevoix, goddamn,
Better you than me.
made his way along the river and reported no sightings of paintings on the rocks whatsoever. And then, for some reason, a U.S. Army officer in 1812 named Major Amos Stoddard would again report seeing a depiction of the Piasa in the same area, But then you can find that there were folks who would explore the Mississippi around the same time and same area who would basically come back and say, no, there wasn't anything there. And we don't know what you're talking about.
So like that's weird. 'Cause I guess why were all these people remarking? Like, were they looking for it and not finding it, or were these people that reported not seeing it, or like, because if you're not looking for it, I would assume that you could easily miss it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that. So it was like, I don't know whether it's easily missed, right? So like, if it was there during any of these extra reports, if it's the same kind of thing that was seen by Marquette and Joliet, that thing was like, people seem to get an impression that it was like a pretty good size, and like you're going down the river and there's these cliff faces, these walls of rock, these walls of stone, and like they're next to you as you're going down the river, so you can see like at least in reproductions of this thing and where people think it was, you wouldn't just like miss it by passing by.
Okay,
unless
so
your eyes were closed.
Gotcha. So if they were asleep, they could have missed it, but multiple people not seeing it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
I guess I wasn't sure exactly how visible
the idea was that people would go by to try and confirm or deny the existence of paintings on this sort of cliff face. And for whatever reason, I guess the point is that there is this weird thing going on where people circulate reports of paintings of a legendary bird or creature, even though beyond the initial account, there may not have been anything there. In fact, Temple says in his paper that despite all the reports, it's unlikely that anybody saw the paintings after 1698. So yeah, it's like, for whatever reason, a bunch of people, enough people, I guess, claimed to have seen it after like 1700 that it's like a thing. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So yeah, it's weird already. But then after all that, in 1836, along comes John Russell. And that's the guy who kind of, he publishes his article on the legend of the Piasa Bird. And that's the story that you'll find online, usually accompanying the cryptozoological account of the thing. Now, what would happen with this article published by Russell? That was presumably, or at least Temple in his paper suggests Russell probably didn't intend this, but like the populace around there who read it would take it as a just straight up historical account.
Okay.
So he's like telling this legendary tale of this Native American chieftain who kills a monstrous bird that was in a battle that was known for like being a man eater. And that's now historical truth for people. The story would become popular.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's where it kind of entered the popular vernacular.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yes. So, yeah. However, there is no such legend, and it would turn out that Russell made the whole thing up.
Yeah, I've been waiting for that for a little while now, so that this whole thing is somehow made up.
So Temple notes that Russell, quote, shows the flair of a novelist, and in which is a nice way of saying
that's a nice,
you know, bullshitting, right? Like he's just putting it nicely that way.
Yeah. That's that's like the really nice way to say that someone's full of shit.
Yes, exactly. In William McAdams's 1887 historical text titled Records of Ancient Races in the Mississippi Valley, McAdams actually asks Russell about the Piasa Bird story. And this leads to Russell admitting that while, quote, there was a somewhat similar tradition among the Indians, unquote, his telling of it may have been, quote, somewhat illustrated, unquote. And then things get worse for Russell's thing here, because he would also later admit to his own son that after reading Marquette's initial account, he fabricated the entire story.
Okay. Yeah, that okay. That tracks.
But here's where this gets like strange and confusing, because
okay.
What ends up happening here is it's uncovered that Russell didn't like come up with this out of total thin air.
So he took a kernel of something and spun a tale out of that?
So he has Marquette's initial account, right, where he sees this painting with this creature. But then he also has some other sources that seem to have been an inspiration on the story, and we're going to get to that towards the end of this episode. So, nonetheless, despite all of this, all the stories told of the Piasa Bird legend that come after this seem to be retellings of Russell's original bullshit story, usually with like embellishments and changes and extra details and things like that. One of the stories would basically, I think it was a German one. That's how far spread this ended up being, by the way. One story, it would get all the way over to Germany, and one story would basically give the creature a more dragon-like appearance. And like people just could not stop fucking up the legend of this Piasa bird. And in 1844, an anonymous resident of Alton, Illinois, who would only go by the letter L, would end up publishing their own account of the Piasa bird after dismissing Russell's story as garbage. So here's what
fucking L Death Note over here.
This is what he was up to before he was fucking hunting down Kira. He was writing anonymously to the people of Alton, Illinois. So L says this, quote, "It is well known to all voyagers on the Mississippi that on the face of the towering bluffs near Alton are portrayed some striking and unique representations, seemingly the work of art, though in a rude and imperfect state. The largest figure of this singular group is of an oblong form and distorted proportions, and is believed by some to be the picture of a monster bird, of which there are no specimens extant in natural history nor any account save in the vague traditions of the Indians. This portrait has become faded by exposure to the elements, and its outlines are but faintly perceived unless closely examined. The color appears to have been of a dark vermilion hue, and its location is somewhat elevated above the now surface of the adjacent bank of the river." So this L person would also continue to fuck up the legend, and he would claim that the creature actually more closely resembled a hippo with branching horns. And
what?
Yeah, for whatever reason, L would also rewrite details about the Native American hero who supposedly felled the beast, the chief that is in the first story. And he would instead claim that it was killed by these twin heroes who were born of a virgin mother. And the twin heroes fought the Piasa using lances, and then after they kill it, they skin its corpse and then use its skinned corpse to trace the outline for the painting on the bluff.
Oh.
So...
Okay.
So yeah, they just like add a bunch of weird bullshit. It's like expanded universe nonsense.
Yeah, they had to like make it so that it wasn't just like an artistic representation. It was a fucking tracing.
Yeah, this is the Piasa bird. What if? Yeah. So through
Ultimate Universe, let's go.
It's super weird. So throughout the mid 1800s, there would be a few more reports that would come in from folks claiming to see paintings on the bluff near Alton. One in particular described seeing, quote, an age-old, half-disintegrating hieroglyphic drawing of a colossal eagle. And as if to make matters worse, Russell, this is again another, I don't understand what's happening here. Russell would publish a new version of his story in 1847 that would have alternate details and additions. And then, so he's doing it himself. Like, not only are people like outside of Russell just fucking up this story, Russell is then going, actually, here is an alternate version of that story. And it gets even worse from there, because then in 1848, Russell would retract the 1847 story and then republish the original.
So he like submitted an edit and then was like, oh, wait, no. And just put the first one back out there.
Yeah, he backpedaled on something. Can't have been because of racism, because people back then were way into that. But like, he's like, I don't know what he's doing here. Like, I don't know why. It makes me wonder. My best guess as to what was happening is like having people like this L person like counter his story. He wanted to like get his grip back on the story again and have it be his or something, you know, like to have somebody just come out and just be like, fuck your story, it's wrong. Because apparently that's what, I mean, I was going to say that's what people did back then, but like, let's be real, that's what people do now.
Yeah, it's
so
times have not changed.
So yeah, but what's interesting about all this is that people in the area, when they're asked about the paintings of a monstrous bird on the bluffs back then, they would kind of mostly agree that they remembered there being something there. Now, hilariously, historian Francis Parkman would pass by these bluffs in 1867 and report this, quote, "The tradition of their existence remains, though they are entirely effaced by time. In 1867, a part of the rock had been quarried away, and instead of Marquette's monsters, it bore a huge advertisement of plantation bitters." So,
like cocktail bitters?
I don't know.
Okay.
You know, they paved paradise and put up a parking lot, dude.
Yeah. It got replaced. This art piece got replaced with a fucking billboard.
If it was there at all. If it was there at all. But the point
if
is,
it was there at all.
The location that people seem to be talking about became a giant advertisement for whatever plantation bitters are, racist bitters, something weird like that. Like it's super, it's completely ridiculous. But I think it's important, like this idea that the way that Parkman phrases this of the tradition of their existence remains. It's such a bizarre concept. It's like, it's like we know it doesn't actually exist, but we have memory of it existing that may or may not be correct. And so it is now tradition here that the bluffs have this painting of a monster.
So it's basically just like the story may all be bullshit, but we all like it. So we're just going to keep believing that, right?
Kind of how it feels. Yeah. So then, throughout the early 20th century, paintings of historical depictions of the Piasa bird would actually be reproduced on the Mississippi River cliffside multiple times, once by a Boy Scout troop, once by a college student, and then multiple times by multiple different artists. So, at this point, the legend of the Piasa was solidified in local lore. And I do believe that there is a reproduction painting from the 1990s that is still on these cliffs to this day. And I'm pretty sure that an Alton High School uses the Piasa as its mascot.
So it's just been accepted in the region as like part of the thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, the mythological Piasa bird also seemed to be incorporated into legends and eyewitness reports of the bird cryptids known as thunderbirds. So we did an episode on thunderbirds way back in 2018. It's episode 126 if you want to check it out. But suffice to say, thunderbirds are canonized as a part of cryptozoology. And the short version is that it's once again people misusing a bunch of Native American mythology and legend, as we do. And would you believe it, there have been a number of sightings of monstrously large birds in southwestern Illinois near the town of Alton. So, one of the earliest accounts claiming to see a monstrous bird in the area comes from a rash of odd sightings in April of 1948. And so Army Colonel Walter F. Sigmund reported the following sight on the 4th of April. Quote, "I thought there was something wrong with my eyesight, but it was most definitely a bird and not a glider or a jet plane. It appeared to be flying northeast, and from the movements of the object and its size, I figured it had to be a bird of tremendous size." And then a few days later, on April 10th, there was one more reported sighting, but it was a quick one. And then finally, on the 24th of that same month, the birds were seen by local airport flight instructors and locals in the area. And both groups of people there reported birds the size of small airplanes. And the flight instructors would get specific about it with their account, saying that the creatures cast shadows, quote, "as big as a Piper Cub from 500 feet up," which a Piper Cub is a small airplane.
Okay, so they're likening it to airplanes.
Yes,
that's fun. That's a fun bit.
Yeah, Look, they're using what they know, you know? So after these sightings, the giant birds would disappear for a few decades. And then on July 25th, 1977, there would be an alarming thunderbird experience reported by a resident of Lawndale, Illinois. So Jerry Coleman wrote of this account for cryptozoology.com, and here's what it says. At approximately 8:10 p.m., the Lowe's family, were cleaning up after their alfresco dinner, the kids still playing outside, and that's when it happened. Ruth, the matriarch of the Lowe clan, was cleaning up in the kitchen where she couldn't see her children. She heard a piercing scream and knew it was none other than her 10-year-old son, Marlon. When she ran outside to see what the commotion was, she was stunned. Two massive birds, flying in a tight wingtip-to-wingtip formation, were chasing her son, Marlon, pecking and clawing at his shoulders. As Ruth ran to Marlon's aid, the larger of the two birds sunk their claws into his shirt, fully lifting the 56-pound boy off the ground. But the birds were no match for a defensive mother. Ruth kept attacking the bird, and it dropped her now terrified son to the ground after carrying him a distance of over 35 feet.
Damn, okay.
When the Lowe's went to the police, they were laughed out of the precinct. One of the cops allegedly said to Ruth over the guffaws of his fellow officers, "Now let me get this straight. A giant bird attacked your nephew?" In her statement... Yes, actually. In her statement to the police, Ruth described the bird as such. It had a white ring around its half-foot-long neck. The rest of the body was very black. The bird's bill was 6 inches in length and hooked at the end. The claws on the feet were arranged with 3 front, 1 in the back. Each wing, less the body, was 4 feet at the very least. The entire length of the bird's body from beak to tail feather was approximately 4.5 feet. So obviously, as with any eyewitness accounts of cryptids, Ruth and Marlon Lowe's story was met with a healthy dose of skepticism and even ridicule. As their story was circulated around the local press, Marlon became known to his schoolmates as Bird Boy, and dead pigeons were tossed onto the Lowe family's porch. Had Ruth not come outside at that very moment, she was sure the bird would have carried her son away.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would... If a giant bird came down and grabbed my son, that would freak me out too. Yeah. I'm gonna fucking, that thing's gonna get speared.
Now
it's gonna be great.
That account, which was originally on cryptozoology.com, is reproduced in on the website Atlas Obscura in an article titled "The Mythic Child Stealing Thunderbirds of Illinois" from 2015. So, like,
it's a pretty good title.
It's another one of those things where, like, this story of a Piasa, it's kind of a thunderbird maybe, and the thunderbirds have been seen in this area of Illinois. So that's how they get incorporated. Even though, like, when you read this woman's account of the thing, it does not sound anything at all, not even remotely close to what was being described in Marquette's account, and honestly not even close to what's being described by Russell in his story. So
yeah, they're all entirely different things.
Very different. So what the fuck is going on here? What happened here is the question. Now, I am so happy to tell you that I have an answer. I can basically tell you what happened here.
All right.
So
what happened?
It seems like the Piasa bird, when you like read Russell's story and all this stuff, it all just seems to be cut from whole cloth, just absolute bullshit. But its presence in southwestern Illinois endures. So how did this happen? Well, in Temple's article, he notes that experts in the language of the Illinois people say there is no such word as Piasa in their language, and all the drawings, depictions, and reproductions of the Piasa bird come well after Marquette and Joliet's initial sighting of the bluffside images back in the 17th century. In fact, all the depictions that we had for a good long while came after Russell's story. Russell's story is the origin point for the drawings, what would end up on the reproduction cliffside in the 1990s. Like, it's from that story. Okay. And that story was not true. Now, there's a lot of weird discontinuity between Marquette and Joliet's sighting and everything that came after. So I want to make note of a few things here. So for starters, like I said, the account does not mention wings on the creature. It also, very importantly, does not name the creature. Like, when Marquette and Joliet saw this thing, they didn't say, oh, the native peoples called it the Piasa. Piasa is the name that would be attributed to this creature after Russell's story.
Okay, so that all comes much later.
Yeah. So, and of course, like I said, we don't have the actual sketch, or we didn't have like a sketch that was with Marquette's journal. So what seemed to be happening here was a bit of a historical mystery that needed solving. So back in 2005, a couple researchers with historical, archaeological, and anthropological backgrounds came together and decided to research this story. These guys are Dwayne Essere, Vinkas Stepanidis, Michael McCafferty, and David Costa. And you can actually find a good video on YouTube of Essere giving a 50-minute presentation on the Piasa bird and how they solved the mystery. Namely, how did the legend become so utterly garbled? And what are the things in that history that are like real? What the fuck happened here? So,
okay.
The first thing that Essere points out is that when you take Marquette's initial description on its own, like divorced from all the additions and fuck-ups that would come in its wake, basically any archaeologist would instantly know exactly what creature he was describing. And that creature is something known as the underwater panther.
What?
Yeah. So the underwater panther is a mythological creature that is well known and spans a number of Native American cultures from like all over the place. It is a very well established thing. It's got hundreds of years behind it in history and stuff. Like it's well known.
Okay.
And so according to Essere, about 50 years ago, there were these archaeologists who were mapping the corpus of North American iconography. And what they did was they began using the term Piasa for these various depictions of the underwater panther. But more broadly, they were trying to use Piasa as this term of grouping together this iconography or general concepts, something that they called a protean super theme. And the Piasa term would be used to refer to this general overarching symbolism that was associated with this underwater panther iconography.
Okay, so it was like a kind of a catch-all for this type of thing in like images and stuff that they're researching?
And symbols and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah. But how did they end up using Piasa for this underwater panther? That's also a question that they had. They're like, okay, so these people have this term Piasa. Well, why are we using Piasa? Well, it seems to stem from a place name, which like I had to kind of like, I'd never seen this like used in this way, but place name is like a toponymy. It's like the origin of words and their meanings, and like, but like literally here, it's like a location's literal name and meaning but they use this.
Okay.
It's like one word put together, place name. So that's what he calls it. That's what Essere calls it, a place name. So he says that this all stems from a place name in 1773 on a map that they uncovered that depicts this place next to the Illinois River. And connected to this stretch of the Illinois River is the Mississippi River, which is the locale that our brave explorers from the start of the story canoed around. And this area had a stretch that was called the Piasa River.
Oh, okay.
And around the Piasa River, they had Piasa Creek and Piasa Island. And then the bluffs along this river that get referenced so often were known as Hauteurs de Piasa. And right down the river from the Piasaws is where modern-day Alton, Illinois sits. And so SRA says that the original account from Marquette and this place name were incorporated into Russell's bullshit story in the early 19th century. So this local Illinois guy, this writer, is incorporating these things. He reads Marquette's original exploration account of this monster and then takes this name and incorporates these things into his 19th century story. So it's like they're thrown together in, a proverbial pot, like so many cryptozoological stews.
Yeah.
However, things are not completely untangled yet, because in 1895, a story was given to the Smithsonian by a Native American man named George Washington Finley, who I think his real name is Tawakwa Kinangwa, but he at some point goes by George Washington Finley. So for whatever reason, I can guess at reasons, but Finley's story that he gave to the Smithsonian went untranslated from 1895 to 2005.
Oh, really? So it was just like sitting in the fucking warehouse somewhere collecting
dust. Nobody translates it, which is one of those things that I hear and feel insane. I just can't believe that something like this would just sit. It's like, it just seems like such an important connecting tissue to history that it's really insane.
But Kyle, how does translating this make Exxon Global money?
That's true. I hadn't looked.
When you think about it that way,
no, you're right. And I am not taking into account Exxon Global or whatever fucking thing. I'm not thinking about that. But that's why that could be that's why I'm not the one who's, working at the Smithsonian.
You don't hold those purse strings or anything, so.
No, got nothing to do with me, and I wouldn't be thinking about that like some more intelligent people might be. So what was uncovered in this translation was a story about a well-established Native American culture hero story. So this was a story about I said that slightly incorrectly. It was a story, but it was about a character that is like a well-established like cultural hero.
Okay.
He is a supernatural trickster being called Wisakachakwa. And Wisakachakwa is like these, or really any story of like tricksters. Again, this is according to SRA. They're usually told as these morality tales. And usually this would be with like the trickster would be living or doing things wrongly. And it was intended to impart a lesson on how not to live like Wisakachakwa. So you were supposed to look at that guy's story and go, I shouldn't do that.
Yeah, I gotta do the opposite of that. Okay, so it's a real good idea, bad idea situation.
Yes, exactly.
Just the bad ideas.
Yeah. So it's in this translated story that we find the truth about the Piasa. So I'm going to give you a very condensed version of the story. So Wisakachakwa and a Frenchman come upon the den of a creature called the Manitou or the Man-Eater. Also, just up front, this is... actually, we'll get to that. So,
okay.
Creature called the Manitou or the Man-Eater. Wisakachakwa basically waits for this thing to fall asleep. It like eats a bunch of people and it falls asleep. And Wisakachakwa fills the Manitou up with gunpowder. And while it's asleep, blows it up. And he takes the den from the Manitou. And then one day, while Wisakachakwa is just like fucking chilling out at his new home, I think the story specifically says he's sunning. He's out front of the den just sunning. He's attacked by these malevolent twin underwater dwarves called Piasaki. And he then cedes the Manitou's den to the Piasaki, and they end up living there. The Piasaki take the den from him. And the story just ends by saying that you can still see the footprints of the evil dwarves there. And the researchers in 2005 were able to find details in Russell's 1836 story, which I didn't tell you his exact version of the story. I told you the one that is like sort of like modern day cryptidwiki.com version. But they found that in Russell's 1836 story, there were details and things and beats very clearly borrowed from the story that was told by Finley in 1895. So, and furthermore, these small supernatural creatures referred to as the Piasaki are frequently symbolically depicted in pottery and artwork alongside the underwater panther. So they all kind of have this like, they're kind of thematically similar things, as I'm sort of understanding it. And they would also these researchers would uncover a map that would show that that this map was produced by the explorer Joliet from the beginning, that would actually contain a drawing of the underwater panther along the Illinois River near where modern day Alton, Illinois is. And there's a long story attached to this map and how they figured out what was going on here. And it's in that lecture I mentioned. And so if you want to know all the details about that, I recommend looking up this lecture. But David Costa through all of these things I just described, he was able to determine that not only was there like clearly connections between these stories, he also found that detail in Temple's 1956 paper about the Native Americans not having the word Piasa in their vocabulary, he was able to confirm that it's actually, there is a word, this word Piasa seems to come from Miami, Illinois Native American word Paisa, which translates to something along the lines of small supernatural.
Okay.
So that's the Piasaki that took that took Wissacachaqua's den that he took from the Manitou, and these two things are like mixed up. So the conclusion of all this is that the researchers believe that there was a mix-up in terminology passed around in this story that at some point Russell seems to have picked up on and incorporated into his version. So we have the Paisa, which are these like small supernatural beings. We have the underwater panther, which is what the original explorers saw depicted probably on the bluffs, and there were crossed wires in all of that.
Gotcha. And so that's how we have the very radically different versions of the creature.
Yes. So things got super fucked up. There's a whole thing too about the Piasaki, where like they have these like weird even numbered toes. And one of the things that it's really crazy. Like the researcher, Aracey, what he does is he looks for accounts from these Native American like reports and stories of even numbered toed creatures like these Piasaki, all across the United States, basically, and is able to like correlate this like association of these like little supernatural malevolent beings and the underwater panther. Like they go really in depth on what happened here, and it's just, I don't know, it's just wild to me. But the short version of it is there was a historical fuck up because a white dude decided to steal a story and was inspired by 17th century explorers. That's the short and skinny of it.
So yeah, they they tried to copy the work, and they fucked up in the middle.
And nobody
somewhere.
showed their notes. So it got really fucked up and became, but now it is just a fully established thing. Like there isn't really this like Piasa winged dragon-like bird-like monster, at least not the way that it gets told in these stories. It doesn't exist, but it's there now, and it's pretty much stuck. But the underwater panther and the malevolent four-toed dwarves that turned into a dragon monster. It's fucking ridiculous.
Like that's like a fucking Digimon evolution. That's not like a Pokemon evolution.
It's all over the place.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is actually the story of the Piasa bird.
All right.
None of which, it's all wrong. Everything about it from every angle is incorrect, and I love it.
It's all made up. It's all false.
It's so crazy. It's so good. I loved reading the story because it was like every couple websites I would find a new clue that was like, hey, this is not that action. Like I would just be reading and be like, oh, okay, so we've uncovered. I would get from one thing to another, and like there's a bunch of archived texts. You can find all this stuff like a lot of these books are on the Internet Archive and stuff. Like it's so crazy. And here's the thing that I think is like maybe a little sad. Nobody except like us and then like these researchers and like archaeologists know or care. Like
about the whole mess up thing and that it's not a real thing.
Yeah. Okay. It's just the Piasa is what it is now, and there's nothing we can do about it. And what you'll find too on some of the websites of people who do care is they're just like, it's so fucking disrespectful for this white guy to completely destroy this story like this.
Yeah, for sure.
Just really, really.
And we're just like running with it, and now it's like a high school mascot and shit. Like,
so there are people out there who do care pretty deeply about like getting, like letting it be known what actually happened here. But probably not the kids who are like, oh, dude, we got the Piasa parade Tuesday at 2 p.m., dude. You're gonna be what did we do in high school?
Math class. What? Some math class. Jesus Christ.
Anyways, Niall.
Oh man.
That's the Piasa bird.
Fantastic.
Are you ready for a big question?
I am.
Okay. Niall, what white people mythology do you think will be fucked up in a couple hundred years, and how do you think it'll get fucked up? Now, white people mythology is a loose thing. I would think, propaganda said it best. White history's like sitcoms. That's the first thing I would sort of think of. Mm-hmm. Like a sitcom or, you go beyond that and it's like a lot of bad shit. Maybe I'm asking what sitcom do you think would be turned into a mythology? And how?
I mean, like, I think somehow people are going to confuse ancient alien mythology with elf mythology.
Okay.
Just because like both deal with like aliens come to Earth and interacting with humans and stuff. So I think like people will just kind of assume that elf is part of the like Anunnaki canon,
Yeah. Okay. All right. So Alf is sort of like an energy vampire, is what you're saying.
Well, yeah. Well, in the way of like, Alf probably helped like seed the fucking, he helped build the pyramids and shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Instead of just like people being able to do that, it was a bunch of fucking Muppets from another planet.
Well, like, yeah, because like, people will think that because Egyptians had cats as kind of sacred, and he eats cats, that he was like a terrorizer back then.
Yeah, that's right. I always forget about that little Alf tidbit because I never actually watched Alf. Everything I know about Alf is like secondhand cultural like osmosis. I never
no one who's not like at least 3 to 5 years older than us has ever watched Alf, but we all make jokes about it. Like it just is one of those things.
Yeah. Now I think that give it a couple hundred years and people are going to really fuck up Seinfeld.
In what way?
I think they're going to look at that and be like, well, clearly this is a wise council's like meeting minutes being recorded.
Just because the mundanity makes it just seem like someone's taking like notes.
Yeah. And like, And maybe like by that point, like laugh tracks, like laughter will no longer register as what it means to us today. Like maybe it'll be like, maybe they'll start like trying to like translate laughter. Like we'll evolve beyond laughter will no longer need it, and they'll be like, oh, we have to translate, but like nobody wrote it down except like ha ha ha, and it like they'll try and translate it, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's what's going to happen to Seinfeld is like you're going to be like, oh well, this is, you know, the United States Council of Wise Elders from the
why is
late 20th century.
Why does Kramer never show up on time to the meetings?
Yeah.
He always comes in halfway through.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's I don't know where I'm going with that bit. That's just what I guess what I'm saying is that's
a very conceptual question.
It is very, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry for that. Okay, I'm sorry.
There's nothing to apologize.
I'm sorry for the conceptual questions. Tell you what, email us a funny thing I could have said here about Seinfeld.
Yeah, write better jokes for us in our inbox.
Oh fuck, Niall, are you ready to do some business?
As always. So if you want to follow us, you can follow us on Twitter at IGW Podcast.
You can follow us on Facebook.com/ItGetsWeirdPodcast.
And we're on all your favorite podcatchers, from Google Play to Apple Podcast, Spotify. If you listen to podcasts somewhere, look up It Gets Weird, and we're probably there.
Twitch.tv/ItGetsWeird. Check it out. Sometimes we play video games on there, and it's a good time. So give us a follow if you like watching Twitch streams. Or even if you don't. If you're like, I've never heard of this Twitch thing. What the hell's that? Maybe we can be your first. That could be kind of cool for you. And for
break
us.
the seal.
Yeah. Email us your extremely funny Seinfeld punchlines that I should have said at itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com. And hey, we might read your episode. We might read your email out loud. We've been getting some really good emails lately. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, we have gotten, there's been an uptick in emails.
I really appreciate it. And then check out patreon.com/itgetsweird. We have a $2 tier and a $5 tier. And at the $2 tier, you get access to It Gets Weird TV, a podcast that we do where we discuss weird television. Right now, we are in season 2 of The X-Files. And then people who donate to the Patreon get to vote on what show or season we watch next. So you could choose for us to watch season 3 of The X-Files, or you could choose from a list of other shows that we have talked about maybe watching and discussing on the show in the future. So check that out. We also have a $5 tier where you get extra bonus material. Episodes that come out in the off weeks of It Gets Weird TV. Sometimes it's me, sometimes it's Niall, sometimes we watch a movie. We do all kinds of stuff. So check it out and donate at the $5 tier. Whether you donate to the $2 tier or the $5 tier, you get access to the main show 2 days early on Friday instead of Sunday, and you get access to the Discord where we're hanging out, chatting about all kinds of stuff. Cryptids, UFOs, ghosts, you name it. We also have a $1 tier where you don't get anything out of it. You're just saying, hey, I like your show. Thanks for doing what you do. Here's a tip. If you can't donate, please tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your congressman all about It Gets Weird. And Niall, we're about to hit episode fucking 400.
We are. I'm afraid to
out.
say the plans of what we're gonna do, because if something falls through, I don't want to have them on the record. But,
I'm not saying shit. Nobody gets it's gonna be a surprise. But I'm excited, and I can't believe that
I am too.
I can't believe we made it this fucking far. So thank you everybody who supported us, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of thank yous and platitudes for all our wonderful, sexy listeners on episode 400. But I'm in case I forget to just like be gushy on episode 400, I wanted to say thank you right now. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. So I guess that'll wrap us up for the week. Thank you all for listening to the show. I've been Niall.
And I'm Kyle, signing out.